Hey, I wanted to make a quick video on a topic that I see a lot of newer tanks struggle with understanding or just being told flat out wrong information. What prompted me to want to make this video was a random crag learn VSC I did where a tank had 65,000 health. The run overall went pretty well, but the tank struggled on the first boss dealing with the hemorrhaging dot Yselia places on you. The tank ended up leaving and blaming the healers for most of his deaths. Before starting, I just want to say that this video is more directed towards people doing hard modes and trifecta runs, as 90% of the content in this game you can do without worrying about your stats whatsoever. However, for some of the newer content like Bosse and Yselia, having a higher max health pool might actually make your life more difficult. So starting off, I want to really quickly go over the benefits of having a higher health pool. The main benefit is just having an all-around larger health pool. The other large benefit from having a higher health pool is bigger tank-oriented damage shields and every other effect that scales off of maximum health. Where this starts to become a problem is in trials like Rockgrove, Cloud Rest, and Sandy's Edge, and newer dungeons. I'm going to be using the trial Sandy's Edge, and more specifically the Yselia fight, as Yselia has a max health percent based dot. Yselia makes this explanation a lot easier as it's also an Oblivion dot, meaning it will do damage straight to your health no matter what. Along with this, you cannot do anything to change the outcome of the dot's damage other than changing your max health. So things like resistances, damage shields, and major and minor protection do not affect the damage this dot does. Before we look at examples of why having higher max health in fights like this would be a bad thing, I want to go over how this dot fully works. Anytime Yselia does any damage to a player, it will apply the hemorrhaging status effect to them. The hemorrhaging status effect will always do 20% of your maximum health no matter what every second. This means no matter your resistances or your max health, you will be killed with 5 ticks of this dot. Now for the quick explanation. You want to get your maximum health as low as possible while still being comfortable with dealing with other mechanics. The lower your max health, the less damage the dot will do. In Yselia, like every other fight with a massive dot, the dot is the largest form of damage anyone will take in the fight. In this case, it's around 50 to 55% of the damage taken by the MT. Overall, this just means the higher your health, the more likely you are to fall behind on healing and end up dying to the dot. Now for a far more in-depth explanation for people who care about numbers. During testing for this video, I used 2 different health thresholds to see how the dot behaved. The most important thing to understand about this dot in particular is that it does 20% of your maximum health no matter what every second if you get hit by any of the boss's main attacks. One small disclaimer is I'm not really going to take the other mechanics into account, as most of them will either just one-shot you outright like the Wamasu charge or do very little damage anyway. So starting off, we're going to look at a tank that has around 34,000 health. If we are sitting at this threshold, the hemorrhaging dot should be doing around 6,800 damage to us. This effectively means throughout the entire fight, as long as we are getting hit by Yselia, we'll be taking 6,800 damage per second. We now want to look at the average output for most healers during this fight. Just remember that healers in this fight have a lot more to take care of than just you. Looking at the healer that tested with me, we can see that they average around 3k a hit on their heals. Granted, this is also a severely nerfed healer due to not having many buffs that would be in place in a normal trial group, but we can see from this chart that Radiant Regen average hit was 3,000, Echoing Vigor averaged about 3.7k, and Healing Springs averaged around 2.6k. It's safe to assume that at the very least Healing Springs will be on you no matter what in this fight. However, things like Radiant Regen may just never target you, as healing targeting is kind of terrible in this game. The other thing you may have noticed that is missing is combat prayer, as I didn't want the healer spamming combat prayer at me, as if there was a group in front of them with a bunch of DDs, they may not hit me with the combat prayer. However, you most likely will have someone targeting you with it every so often in this fight. We can see from this chart that they most likely would be able to keep up with the dot in this scenario. If we move on to my other test, we can look at a tank that has around 51,000 health. This is a bit short of the 65,000 health the other tank had, however I'm just not sure how he got that high, but overall it shouldn't matter that much as the dot will be doing a substantially larger amount of damage. Speaking of the dot, if we look at how much the dot damage would be for a 51,000 health tank, it'd be around 10,200 damage a second. You can see why this would become ridiculous towards higher health tanks. Eventually you'd be taking upwards of 11 to 12k damage per second, and no real healer is going to be trying to heal you out of that. This is also not taking into account the fact that healers have to worry about the off tank and the group as a whole, as in this fight on hard mode there's a lot of damage going out towards the group almost at all times. As you get higher and higher health, the healers have to work harder and harder and harder to keep you alive, and spending less time healing the group or healing the off tank, which is also dealing with the same kind of effects you are. Not to mention, if the healers for whatever reason run out of of resources, or just something happens, they lag, miss input, or anything, they can easily now fall behind your health, as 10k instead of 7k is a lot harder to recover from. I just wanted to circle back around to why this video was made. The tank we were running with had a extremely large health pool and was taking an extreme amount of damage, and just because it was vet, it should have been easier, and yes, the healer probably could have helped them out a little bit, but you can't expect your healers to be the best healers in the world every time from a crag punk. This used to not be much of an issue, as health-based dots have become more of a recent thing. Zamaja is probably the oldest example I can think of a health-based mechanic being baneful, which if you have 100k health, you're kind of just screwing yourself in that fight. So relying on healers has become a lot more important in trials, and just having good healers in general is becoming a lot more important. So that's about it. I just wanted to go over one little thing for people who are maybe progging this fight or just don't know exactly how it works. Most of the time when you take the heavy attack and you block it, you get a heal absorb, and so a lot of people have now resorted to just eating the heavy attack face on and taking the around 60% damage increase, because this effect doesn't actually increase the damage of the dot. And since block mitigation and just mitigation in general has gotten so high, direct damage doesn't do much anymore, so taking the 60% from her direct attacks doesn't really matter. So if you're struggling with the heal absorb, just, I don't know, maybe try just eating her heavy attack and see what happens. There's also some funny business you can do with some scribing stuff that I might make a video on because it's funny, but that's for another day.